Rane has just released version 1.2 of firmware for their latest mixer, the Rane 72. In this video, I got through all the new features. Find out what those are coming up. Thank you for watching PDot TV, where you'll find tips, tricks, and tutorials for DJs and music performers. Now let's get into the video. So the first really cool new feature of this new firmware has to be the fact that now when you switch pad modes on this mixer, you actually get to see a representation of the controls on the screen. So if I go ahead and switch from Q mode to auto loop, you'll see these auto loop functions come up, and it shows you each of the different beat divisions. Same thing with roll, sampler, slicer, and then if I go into secondary modes, I can go into manual loop, and now you can see that you can have your different save loops. Let me get that one more time. As well as in and out points, and on off, and loop out as well. If I go to pad effects, you can see the different pad effects. If I go to the fader effects, you can see the different kind of fader effects that are there, and as well as transport control, you can see what each of the transport controls are. Now, as you notice, it appears and disappears, in a decent amount of time, and that's good because you don't want that up when you're DJing all the time. But for instance, if you want the transport controls up and you don't want it to disappear because you're not really too familiar with what each of those do, if you go ahead and tap there on the actual name of whatever mode it is, it'll go ahead and stick. So if you want to get this to go away again, all you have to do is switch to another pad mode, click on the screen again, and there it goes, disappear and gone. So another pet peeve of mine was that this scroll knob to scroll through your library, when touched when you're in the waveform view, automatically switches to the library view so you can select songs. Now I guess that's really useful if you're used to that, but sometimes I would just barely touch it and it would switch to this mode. And as you can see, there's a little delay to switching back and forth between the library view and the actual waveform view as well. But now we have the ability to turn this on and off. So to do that, just go ahead and head to the menu section. Then I can go into the display. And now right here, you'll see where it says scroll touch. I can just highlight that, and now I can turn that off. Now when I go back, the touch is no longer functional. So if I want to get back into that library mode, I just have to hit this button again, the view mode, and I can get back in the library. So you do lose the ability to scroll really fast, but for most DJs, I think hitting this one button instead of just waiting for it to change is just as fast, if not faster. Now another improvement that they've made with the 72 is the ability to change the size of the actual waveforms. So if you are a 72 user, these waveforms might look a little bit smaller, and that's because I've already adjusted them. So if you just go ahead and use pinching and widening motions, you can change the length or the size of these waveforms. And still, you can still scroll through. So if I go ahead and change them, you can see you can get pretty far down and get pretty close. And then if I have these playing, you can see that's pretty tight in there, and you can get pretty far out too. So now this can reflect how you have your Serato DJ setup on your computer a little bit better. And personally, I always thought that the waveform setup with the default in the 72 in the previous firmware was a little too close for me. So now I'm probably gonna rock that one right there that I had it at. That way I can see it a little bit further coming into the track, as well as still maintain using the grids to kind of help me line the songs up with my eyes, as well as use my ears to beat match as well. Also now, another change that they've done with the display is in the library view, now you can go ahead and have these songs start scrolling right here if they have a long name. Previously, they didn't do that before, so now they do. That's really cool. So if you have songs with long song titles, I know there's a lot of DJs out there that have edits that have, everybody's name, and if it's a transition track. So this can help out a lot if you have a lot of songs with long song titles. And one more cool feature that they've added to the actual display is if we go into the menu once again, we can now change the startup view. So the original default was the effects, so you can have it set to waveform or the effects now. So I'm probably gonna have it set to the waveform because I don't really need the effects up right away, and I'm always switching to waveform anyway. So one less thing to check once I start up this mixer. Another thing in the menu that they've changed is now you can actually change the range of the actual filter on this mixer. So if we go back from display and then we go to mixer settings and we go to filter setup, right here, you see low pass minimum and high pass max, we can go ahead and change that. So you can have a little bit of low pass left or high pass left instead of just the full cut that you have on this actual filter. And because you have that resonance, so you can really dial in if you want a little bit of bass with a little bit of resonance in it, or a little bit of highs with some resonance in it. The options have just been increased by a lot, in my opinion, where you have, you can change it and tweak it to make it the kind of filter that you really want to use. Another thing that they've changed with this inside the actual settings is now, if we go under touch effects setup, you now have the option to change the touch effects into a tap tempo. So if you aren't a user of the touch effects a lot and you'd rather have the tap tempo to tap in the effects, especially if you're using vinyl or another source that isn't Serato and you're not getting the right BPM, or maybe you're using a transition track and the BPM setup in that isn't, you didn't beat grid it right to have it on the right BPM. You now have the ability to quickly tap tempo in and get the effects sounding the right way, right on time, with just using the actual touch effects button that's on the mixer. And that's really useful, like I said, especially if you don't use the touch effects that often. And one more thing about this too is if you do have this set to tap and you still want to get to touch effects, all you have to do is hit shift and then hit touch effects and you can switch to that mode. So it's not gone, you're not losing any functionality. It just takes an extra step to get to a mode that you might not use all the time. Now some more actual effect settings that they've changed is if we go into the flex effects, now right here at the top we have this thing that says beat multiplier. So if we select that, you can change it to simple, let's go back to the beginning. So extended, which is the normal setup and the default setup that we had in the previous firmware of this mixer, where you had not only quarter beat, half beat, but you had triplets and stuff like that. But a lot of DJs, myself included, really don't use the triplet settings. So they've now added the ability to remove those by going to simple. And there's even more where you get no dotted and no triplet as well, so you can take out just some of them. But I'm gonna be keeping mine at simple, so I just have 16th, 8th beat, half beat, quarter beat, full beat, 2, 3, 4, etc., without having to skip through those extra settings to get over those triplets. Now one thing that's on here as well that I really can't show here is that they've actually redone the echo, hold echo, and duck echo on this mixer to make it more aligned with those echo effects that were in the actual 62, which in my opinion is an improvement, because one thing that I mentioned before in my previous review of this mixer is that those effects didn't really have the power that the 62 or the 900 Nexus or the S9 had, where they always felt a little dull and felt a little bit more quiet compared to this mixer compared to the other mixers. So now we have the 62 effects on here, which in my opinion are a lot better, where they're pretty loud, pretty on par, and if you need to turn them down to make them sound like the old 72 firmware, you can just go ahead and turn the wet dry down and dial it in right the way you want it. So that's a look at all the new features of version 1.2 firmware for the Rane 72. So question of the day, which of the new features is your favorite? Go ahead and leave that down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, if you found this video useful, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, go ahead and click right here to subscribe to this channel. Or if you'd like to watch more content, go ahead and click on that video right there. And thank you for watching PDot TV, where you'll find tips, tricks, and tutorials for DJs and music performers. See you next time.